All right, I think we're up. I think it's 5 minutes past. Should we kick off?
Do it.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's kick off. My name is Gavin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of RADiCAL. I'm not the only co-founder. There's two. Matteo Gioberti is the other, and I think he's probably somewhere in attendance as well, although he's not on the panel. We started the company about 6 years ago. We are as a pure motion capture company now. We also do much more, and in fact, a lot of what we'll talk about today is not just about motion capture, but also goes into previs and 3D content creation, and indeed AI. And we about 3 years ago were also supported by Autodesk, and we have a few other partners like Epic Games, Unreal Engine, and so on and so forth. But what we're about to show you today really is about what we can do as RADiCAL alone, what you can do with RADiCAL as well. The way we've set up the presentation is that it's about 1 hour. And if we do our job right, then you'll really fall into two big chunks and then a little bit of Q&A at the end. The first chunk of it is an open conversation with Lisa Gerber here, and everybody will be able to introduce themselves in just a moment, and Allan McKay. And that conversation, about 20 minutes or so. We might go over slightly, but not by much more. And then we'll switch to a presentation where we'll actually go through some of the tools that RADiCAL is building in the space, and hopefully that you might find interesting. If we do our job right, then we will have 5 or 10 minutes at the end to answer questions. And you will also be able to ask questions throughout the webinar. That's my understanding, at least. Maybe Alice Gardner, who is also on this call, if she's part of the RADiCAL team, she can respond to that, or maybe just confirm that you indeed are able to ask questions throughout. And Alice will also be fielding those, so we'll be looking at those, and perhaps she'll let me know if something really interesting comes up that we should look at, that we should discuss here on the panel. There will also be a poll throughout that I think you will be presented with. So maybe if you could look at those, that'd be great. It was super helpful for us to understand who you are and also what kind of content you might like in the future. And then I'll probably mention this at least twice before we do the demo. The demo will be live, real-time, interactive through the browser. And indeed, you can join it through your device that is right in front of you. So if you haven't done so yet, go to radicalmotion.com, set up a completely free account. You will need it to join the demo once we share the link. By that point in time, you will want to have set up that account. It's Google single sign-on, should be quick, but you have to confirm your email. Okay. Now, before I ask the speakers to introduce themselves, I'm just going to look at the watch. I'm going to try and time myself. I wanted to just address some just big themes here. Yes, we're going to talk about RADiCAL, and yes, we're going to take the opportunity to hopefully make you more interested in what we do. But genuinely, I felt that when we ask people like you to join a webinar, I want you to walk away with hopefully some knowledge beyond just RADiCAL, but just on the general topic as well, that you maybe hadn't quite crystallized in the way that it will be discussed today. So hopefully this will be useful. And I have to say there was a bit of soul searching between the three panelists here and also the wider RADiCAL team, because the topic is AI. And there is no way to get around the topic without acknowledging that there are a lot of sensitivities around the topic. We were going back and forth on how we best should manage this. Fundamentally, the question is it a friend? Is it a foe? Is it a good thing? Should we embrace it? Should we not embrace it? But I think a lot of the answers are also really contextual. So what part of the pipelines are you looking at? Where are you? Are we talking about visual effects? Are we talking about video generation? Are we talking about 3D mesh generation? Are we talking about pre-production planning? Are we talking about post-production? Are we talking about pitching? Where are you in your project, and where does it all fit in? Where we've come out is that we're really going to constrain ourselves. We're not going to say this is a broader conversation about all AI and all of filmmaking. I think that would simply not be fair toward you. We can't do that. We can't do an adequate job here today of covering that, nor can we adequately cover the ethics of it. But what we can do is talk about AI in the context of pre-visualization for filmmakers. And that is what we're going to try and do honestly and openly. And that's also why we have, I think, great panelists who can hopefully, really give deep insights. They have also done a bit of research themselves. Okay, I'm aware that I've now done a long intro. I'm going to try and hand over to Lisa and Allan, but I do owe it to myself and I do owe it to RADiCAL just to make one point about AI. We do use AI in one specific way, RADiCAL. We do not, however, ever train on any creative works of anyone else. We only train AI in the context of our motion capture product. So we only train on highly curated motion data at the moment. That's all we do. We are sort of in the what we like to call the white hat camp of the generative AI companies out there. So it's really limited to that kind of AI in terms of what we do. But there will be broader conversation about it now. I'm going to very quickly ask Lisa Gerber to introduce herself, and then Allan McKay. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, yeah. So thanks, Gavin, and thanks to the whole team at RADiCAL for having me. I think we have an intro slide, right? Yeah.
You're gonna have to go with this.
Okay, I'm gonna roll with it. So currently, I head up the product roadmap for media and entertainment at Lumen Technologies. Prior to this, I was at AWS. I actually I started out in entertainment. I have creative roots. I worked in front of the camera, and then later that was many years ago, and then later in film and television casting. I wrote and produced some smaller independent projects, but I started my career in tech about 10 years ago, always in the context of being a representative of the media and entertainment industry. And I joined RADiCAL, the advisory board at RADiCAL, because I think it's really important to stay close to creative tools, and it's vital to keep the creative perspective close in all I do and in the work that I do. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here and be part of the conversation.
And we're thrilled to have you. I think you only joined the advisory board, like, was it 2 weeks ago or something
Like
like
2 weeks
that?
ago. Yep, super new.
Compared to you, Allan is actually a senior member because he's been with us for a few months. Allan, you
So
want
you're
to
gonna call
introduce
me an
yourself?
old man?
No, wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I'm Allan McKay. I'm a visual effects supervisor. I've been working or been in computer graphics since about '93, and it's been fun to kind of watch the entire industry grow over time. And yeah, I've worked on movies like Transformers, Star Trek, Superman, video games, Call of Duty, Destiny, Halo, God of War, a lot of random stuff. Shogun was one of the more recent projects that I was CG supervisor on, and yeah, I am co-founder of Version Zero, which is more AI and visual effects. But I've been on the advisory board for RADiCAL for, I don't know, it feels like about 6 months now. And it's been really fun just to see the innovation over that time as everything grows. And personally, for me, like, previs is something that's really exciting because it is really the stem of where a lot of the creative vision comes from. And it's a chance to really be able to plan everything out on set, and before you get on set, and be able to map everything out and have a clear plan that you can actually not only have in your mind but also show it to other people, so that way everyone else has an idea rather than just having that idea in your head and hoping that everyone else is able to align with it.
This is a great way to set up the actual conversation. So all of you out there who have joined this webinar will probably know well what previs is. I'm just going to allow myself just to summarize it in a nutshell, the way we define it. It helps map out camera angles, movement, timing, and effects in pre-production. And that's important. So during the pre-production phase, before you go on set, we want to understand how we're going to use camera angles, movement, timing, and effects, what locations look like, what the actors look like, given the context. It also allows teams to test ideas and spot issues long before they start filming. And of course, the idea is that it boosts efficiency, coordination, and so on and so forth. I will say that that description should apply to almost any film. It makes sense to boost efficiency and to do planning. However, the reality is that that kind of previs is also mostly done today, if not entirely. I think this is the question I'll raise with Allan in just a moment, in 3D. That means previs equals 3D pipeline. The truth is that historically, only projects, predominantly projects that probably were pretty VFX heavy or animation heavy, would even do full previs for that reason, because it involves a 3D pipeline in the first place. But to address the ugly truth in the room, and I was just at the British Society of Cinematographers where I raised this, all real life sort of cinematographers, and I said, how many of you, asked them, how many of you, a room of, a few hundred cinematographers, how many of you love 3D? I think there are 2 or 3 hands that went up, right? The rest of them are like, at best, an eye roll, right? And that's the reality of previs, and we just have to be honest about that. Historically, most filmmakers will say, 3D, not why I went to film school, right? So, and this is, by the way, part of the answer to the question, why did RADiCAL start developing what it's developing? With that in mind, just one distinction, we do also see people talking about pitching, prototyping, and I think, Lisa, you mentioned another term yesterday in the prep meeting that was important, like how sometimes previs is being described. So it could be used not just in pre-production planning before you go on set, it could also be used in pitching, prototyping, developing ideas, even before a project is greenlit. But Lisa, I'm actually going to ask you that question again, but because I thought it was interesting to make that distinction. But before we do that, I think I'm just going to switch over to Allan just very quickly. Can you give us a sense of also, within the context of the projects that you've been part of, how have you witnessed previs evolve throughout your career, and what are some of the key tools? And if you can do that in just a few minutes, that'd be super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think previs, really in the ways it's changed, is more in the way that it's actually relied on a lot more heavily. I think in the past it's been more that specialized studios that are involved the entire production would typically be able to provide the service, and it wasn't something that was more general. It was definitely the Wild West back in the day, being like the late 90s, let's say. But over time, with tools like Unreal, obviously with RADiCAL, with so many others, like it definitely has changed a lot. But at the same time, it still is something that there needs to be a budget for it. It's typically gated in the sense that it costs money and requires a lot of prep time. In my experience, shows that have less money are typically the Wild West, and so it's very congruent with that chaos ensues, and planning is not part of that. But I will say that as things become more accessible, I think the main areas that it's evolved is in terms of having a pipeline, having accuracy, cameras that translate to being on set. So that way you're not using some kind of camera that's 3D and then suddenly it's recreating it all later on. It's more constraints in terms of real world assets, camera rigs, things like that. So bit by bit, things have become a lot more consistent with the execution rather than it being, let's just map something out. And at the same time, it's becoming a lot more accessible, a lot more affordable than it has in the past.
So let's just put some numbers on it. Let's just take RADiCAL out of this a little bit, because RADiCAL is, has a completely different paradigm in terms of cost. In fact, most of what you're about to see today, you can do for free on our website. So, but let's talk about the budgets that historically were necessary to even, where you would even start considering a 3D previs pipeline. With this rough estimate, would you be comfortable like saying probably nothing below?
It's kind of like how long is a piece of string? It really depends on so many factors, more to do with the type of project, the length of it, whether it is something that's more for feature film or commercials. But in general, when you're looking at more of the cost of operations, you're looking at maybe like 30 grand. It can scale up from there if it's like a bigger feature film that requires a lot of revisions. But yeah, it's scalable based on budget, schedule, and constraints all play a factor, but it's definitely not pocket change by any means.
But if you take a feature film, what kind of budget would you say? I mean, unless it's at that budget or higher, they probably won't be using a 3D previs pipeline. Is that possible? Is it possible? Were you comfortable to say that, or that too
Yeah,
simplistic?
mid-tier and high tier, you'll typically always use previs. More low ticket, anything that's like sub $35 million. Typically
There you go.
previs, visual effects supervisor, none of that stuff is,
So
ever kind of
that's
falls
the
into it.
hard hitting kind of webinar I was hoping for. There's a number here, right? $35 million. And the truth is that, we're mostly in Europe over here. And the truth is, in our minds, $35 million, that's not a small budget in the rest of the world, right? And that means in our minds, and that's part of the RADiCAL story, we think that 95% of all filmmakers out there don't have access to a 3D pipeline for two reasons: too expensive, too hard to use, right? And that's essentially why we exist, because we think you shouldn't be limited to large budget VFX pipelines or projects, but we think that this kind of pipeline should be available to everyone. But I'm rushing a bit ahead. Before I go to you, Lisa, just maybe one or two more questions that I thought would be of interest to everyone. Who are the key people that you think are involved in the previs process today, looking at and should be involved? Like, who are the personas? I'm thinking like cinematographer, for example, right?
So traditionally, it's usually the director sitting down with one, maybe two previs artists, and there's a big dialogue going on between them. The main thing is that the material that's being built for previs is then being discussed with the DP, with producers, with other team members such as the AD. And again, the purpose of that is to evolve from storyboards to something that is actually capturing time, specific camera angles. There's less guesswork involved. So that is the main thing. It's very much an intimate thing between the director and the previs artist. It's also a great way for artists to kind of get their chance to start moving into a director role. But it then is offloaded into discussion with a lot of other parties. One thing I will say, and not to blow smoke up RADiCAL's butt, however, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today is exactly why I think that can very much change now, where it can be a very interactive experience with the DP, the AD, everyone else involved, not just the director and the artist, because things are going to be a lot more accessible now than they have in the past.
Okay, great. I promised myself, and I promised everyone to hear that is in attendance today, that we'll ask the hard-hitting question too, and that is, how is AI currently being used in previs, given pre-production pipelines and given also pitching and prototyping? But I really feel like when you get to Lisa as well, and then maybe I'll come back to both of you and ask both of you the question, if that's okay. Lisa, you're in LA. You've been part of the community, and I think sort of different parts of the production pipelines. You've seen a lot of them, and I also know that you spoke with a few people in your sort of network over the last few weeks to sort of see what they feel about the topic. What's the atmosphere like right now in LA? Maybe in the context of AI, maybe more generally.
So in the entertainment industry in general, and in Los Angeles, like the creative community in LA, I will say, the atmosphere is, morale is not great, just as far as, and I'm not going to tell anyone, in this audience anything they don't know. And in 2021, there was this sort of domino effect of the streamers, tapping the brakes a bit on production, and then the strikes, and here we are. And I think the industry is kind of finding its new legs, and independent film is proving to be actually pretty resilient and show pockets of momentum. And I think that's because filmmakers, were scrappier to begin with. Filmmakers know how to, independent filmmakers especially, know how to save money when they have to. They're storytellers, and they don't need a tremendous amount of money to tell their stories. And I think that's what's really amazing and inspiring about the community.
Great. And how do you see new tools coming up a lot in your recent conversation, and maybe including AI?
Yeah, I think simple tools that empower, like Allan was saying, empower the director's vision are really front and center. And remote collaboration is also really front and center. And there's a spotlight on that because of how decentralized the industry has become. And I think, cost-effective tools can really fill the gaps where, these other methods are non-starters.
And how do so you've spoken with a few independent filmmakers, right? Across the spectrum. Oh, that's a cat, Alan. I like that. That was good. How do you think they feel about 3D?
Yeah, so I did when I joined the board, I asked some folks for feedback, a TV producer and a couple filmmakers I know. I got the sense, that it was a non-starter for them. And I think, even there are some where there's more of an openness to working in new technology than others. And
Sure.
but even where there is that openness, there is sort of this allergic reaction to anything that could even resemble complication or even the
Gotcha.
idea of complication.
Or taking a single dollar out of the budget, right? When
Yeah, exactly. Or anything that could slow their process throughout the, urgency of filmmaking after, the calm has sort of passed in pre-production. But when they start to really open up is when there is that simplicity and when it can be in service of the director's vision and when it gives them, whether they're in production, the DP or the set designer to say, hey, I hear you, this is what you're envisioning, this is the location that you saw, I'm going to yes and that, add my lighting, add these pieces to it, and then, and sort of bring their own vision to it, then it becomes really exciting and you can hear them light up. And I do agree, with what Alan was saying. There is this idea that previs is only for these higher budget
Yeah.
movies. And when we talked about, or projects, and when we talked about the idea that it could be democratized and be something that they could use too, and be iterative, then it was exciting and new for
That's
them.
nice to hear. So
Yeah.
I'm going to ask both of you the hard-hitting question that everybody wants an answer to.
Uh-oh.
How do you currently see AI being used in previs? Not all filmmaking, right? But I will set you up, Alan, a little bit for that question, right? So you are obviously involved with larger projects and often projects that involve going from previs to to like post-production and using a VFX heavy pipeline, right? And there's a bit more of a seamless relationship there between previs and post-production and VFX. What kind of tools do you see being used today? And now I'm going to openly also ask you, outside of 3D, what kind of AI tools do you currently see in the previs pipeline, given the project you're involved in?
Yeah.
And Lisa,
Cool.
I'm going to
Thank
ask you the same question. My apologies. Sorry.
Just to really 10 seconds piggyback on what Lisa's saying. Yeah, I completely agree that it's been interesting. I've had a lot of calls with a lot of big directors who are more in the indie film space this year, which I've never have really done in the past. And it is because they have, let's say, $5 or $6 million, but it is literally make or break whether they can make a movie or not. If they can't afford the visual effects to patch up the fact that they're shooting on the other side of the world instead of New York, etc. And that's where AI has become a bit more of a welcomed conversation, not in a way to like make things cheaper and dirtier. It's literally life and death as to whether or not they can make the movie. And even in the past week, that's becoming like a much more acceptable conversation.
So this is we're talking about production here, or even post-production.
I'm
This is
talking
not
about making the films as a whole.
Okay.
So I just want to elaborate on that in terms of how it's being used in let's say visual effects and the 3D pipeline for previs. It's a mixed bag. It's the taboo areas is script treatment, is concept art, things like that, and it is definitely being used there, and it's definitely frowned upon. At the same time, studios are training their own models and trying to do everything ethically on material that they own. Big areas would be rigging. Animation has become a big part, but it isn't
this
about
is the 3D. This is now so animation
exactly.
rigging.
So it isn't
3D.
about taking over the job where you hit a button and it all does it. It's about like assisting people, removing the areas that are redundant. So like rotoscoping. There's my cat again. I can't control him. Rotoscoping, paint, camera tracking, things like that become easier and easier. At the same time, production like modeling, animation, rigging, all these different areas, lighting, rendering. It's more helping assist artists in doing what they're doing rather than removing that role altogether.
Okay. So I think there's a lot of, at least I'm still going to come to you with a very similar question, but before we do, there's a lot of attention out there. Certainly for some reason, like whenever I look at LinkedIn or so other social media platforms, the debate around, generative AI, there's a lot of focus on what sort of video generation, right? We call it straight to pixel because we're coming at the 3D space. So, we don't go straight to pixel, we go to 3D geometry. But the point here is that there's so much attention on video generating AI models. Do you see those being used today in pre-production planning?
No, not today. They're not controllable enough. And that's why previs is very specific. You need a V1, V2, V995. So they're not typically used for that reason of you're rolling the dice and getting a different result each time. That will change. But at the same time, right now, it's really impressive tech, but not leveraged in any way in terms of film work.
That's entirely consistent. Also, what we are being told, by the way, by everyone we speak to. But Lisa,
I'm in very high level meetings about this stuff with studios, and it's literally they're being told by OpenAI and everyone else just hit the button 30 times and then try to pick a version that you like the most. Like that is literally what they're being told for Sora and all these other ones. So it's definitely is kind of roll the dice.
And that gets an eye roll, I'm guessing. At the Lisa, but pre-production planning isn't the only way we think about previs, at least the way we define it, right? So there are other ways you can talk about prototyping your creative project. For example, pitching. I'm thinking of commercials directors that are trying to win the deal from a creative agency, right? Have you seen other ways in which AI has been used and which could be included in the definition of a previs prototyping, visually prototyping?
I agree, pitching, yes. Anytime a writer who hasn't been paid yet for the script that they're pitching is on a shoestring budget and wants to express an idea in order to sell that project, if they're given the option to use AI to simply convey it, I think it's appealing and attractive. I also think with commercials, there's something to be said for the exactitude of every frame needs to be perfect and it needs to be delivered on this time with a client that might know exactly what they have in mind already. So, but I think in general, it's more, I can't be as specific to previs as Allan can, but I think in general, it's more about, I saw this quote that was, I want AI to do my dishes and run my errands so that I can write my scripts, not write my script so that I can do my dishes and run my errands. And I thought, it just rang true because it was however, in whatever workflow or medium, if it's in support, it's just going to hit different. Right.
Okay. In the meantime, I've opened up the chat and there's some quick feedback here from from the RADiCAL team to us, saying current stats on the poll. I'm going to share some of it with everyone here. 53% of you are comfortable with 3D, 25% are somewhat comfortable with 3D, and 19% can't even open Blender. That's not my choice of words. That's the way it's presented to me. 68% have used AI for pitching. 5% never even thought about it. And here's the number that really hits me. 65% say that they've used AI during pre-production. 3% never even thought about it. So the question I would love to ask, a follow-up question, I don't know if that's possible for you, Alice, back there, is to ask what kind of AI? 3D, that's something that helps you in the 3D pipeline or something that helps you create pixels and videos, right? In pre-production, right?
I can start a new poll. What exactly would you like to know? What kind of
AI? Does it produce 3D? Does it help you in the 3D pipeline? Does it help you create video content?
Right.
And also, then use that in pre-production, not pitching, right?
Also, just a quick time check.
Yeah, we're moving on.
Demo.
Yeah, we're moving on to the demo. Actually, I think we're sort of only 3 or 4 minutes behind my initial schedule, so I think we're doing okay-ish. All right, so I think if it's okay with you, Lisa and Allan, first of all, thank you so much for participating in this kind of conversation. I actually think we managed to hit some points that maybe like people don't speak about too openly, and I hope that was helpful to a lot of people. I'm still sharing my screen, and I'm now going to set up the demo. So I'm just going to ask our colleague Rudy Fanti to get ready. I'm going to hand over to you in just a moment. In the meantime, I'm just going to very quickly switch to the slide. To the slide. This is just 1 minute of setting you up for this demo. What you're about to see, how RADiCAL was conceived. The initial starting point was always 3D is too hard, and there's always, especially in the filmmaking world, the vast majority of filmmakers will say, this is not why I got into film. We need to, if you want me to use previs pipelines, it needs to be way easier to use and still hopefully produce results that are nice to look at. We then looked obviously at whether straight to pixel AI is of help, but as I think you heard Allan say, most people will today complain about a lack of control and precision. It's not real time. There's also no real time interactivity. There's no real time collaboration either. And it can be rather expensive at scale once you go through that Russian roulette type of creativity here. And it's quite slow at processing. That said, of course, it can give you really highly polished videos, and that can be really attractive to some people. But that is really how we were born, right? This is another one of our board members, is Joe Marks, the former CTO of What a Digital, and he said very nice things about us. So I thought I'll leave that here for a moment. I was full of smiles when he said that to me on a call. So this is what we do. It's AI-fueled 3D storytelling with superhuman control because it's 3D. 3D guides everything, but we think we've made it easy, intuitive, real-time, collaborative, and that's because everything you're about to see is in the browser. Everything you're about to see can be used with any consumer device. At the moment, I still think that Windows with an NVIDIA card will still do slightly better than an old Mac that is more than 4 or 5 years old. So if you're on a Mac right now and you're going to join us, you should be fine if you have an M1, M2, M3. Pre that, Macs do suffer a little bit, but otherwise we support all consumer devices, really. It's all real time, it's all in the browser, and therefore it's real time collaboration. These are the features you're about to see. We have an assets library. You can upload your own assets, including scans of real life locations. I don't know whether we can demo that today. I've just not enough time. But you can do that, and that's important for previs, of course. There's real-time AI 3D motion capture that is just from a single webcam. We'll demo that to you as well today. You have virtual cameras that represent real-life cameras and physical sort of calibrations. And then we have lighting and visual effects in here. I don't think we have visual effects today in the demo. And then there is a timeline that allows you to animate everything, hopefully really intuitively. And with that in mind, Rudy, I'm just going to hand over to you. And I'm going to stop screen sharing so you can take over.
Let me just share the
And
screen.
then I'm going to ask Allan and Lisa to essentially take over from here. Is that right? Allan, so you had a session with Rudy yesterday and last week where you sort of were looking at the scene that Rudy had prepared. I should also explain, sorry, Rudy is our creative lead. He only joined us, I think, just by now, sort of a month and a half ago. You were at Framestore before, so you've done a lot of previs in your life and also VFX post-production. Rudy, you want to take over? And Allan, is that okay? Otherwise, I'm happy to comment along.
No, absolutely.
Right, what do we see here?
Hey, Rudy. Do you want to quickly walk us through your scene, Rudy?
Yeah, this is just something we started putting together a few days ago. So it's a very simple scene, but very playable in a sense, in a previous sense. So there's a full camera track already set up. And we're going to see just a few sequences, which I quickly put together. And so the idea is that we are in a military setting and we are previsualizing some sort of truck inspection at a checkpoint. Super simple.
Awesome.
And this is in the browser, right? Important to mention. No? Sorry,
exactly. In the browser.
That's right, yeah. It's good to point out is like everything here is in the browser, which means you can access it from anywhere. I guess just to start out, if you want to finish setting up the scene, just dress it with additional props to help break up that horizon line. Give a bit more mid-ground.
Absolutely. So this is actually what we're talking about. We can work with an asset library. This is what we're working on now. We're going to see categories in a while, actually in a few days probably. You can drag and drop whatever you want in the scene in a very intuitive way. So for example, if we want to mirror now, let's say, as you say, Alan, break the horizon a tiny bit, and drag and drop this guy here. The cool thing is already see the preview or where it's going to be placed. You have a quality selector, so the asset is going to be optimized in real time. In this case, we don't care about the optimization. You can quickly, and whoever is familiar with 3D, you don't need to be familiar with 3D, but the cool thing is that whoever is familiar with 3D will have a sense of familiarity also within our editor. I speak as a professional 3D artist, so I know where to look around. We have a gizmo and we have coordinates, but also it's very simple to just drag and drop stuff around.
Yeah, and maybe can I mention though, at the top right of your screen, you'll see a bunch of like little avatars next to Rudy's avatar, next to the share button, top right-hand side. You see people, 3 people logged in. I'm actually one of them. And you could have hundreds or thousands of people logged in and they could all work together collaboratively, right? So right now it's only Rudy because we really wanted to keep it mainstream or rather constrain it to just a few people to get through it fast. But you could easily invite a lot of people. And in fact, that's what we'll do. In about 50 minutes from now, we'll all invite you in to join this particular scene and open it up on your screen as well. Sorry, go ahead, Rudy.
Sure. But
so Rudy, theoretically, could you bring in any 3D asset? Could you have something that's, you know, scanned or?
Yeah, at the moment we didn't prepare a scan, but, whatever you see on the left side, it's actually, you can drag and drop, for example, this pile of rocks.
Right. But
but you can upload your own assets as well into the library, right? That's important to state.
Absolutely. You can just click on upload and whatever you want to import in a GLB format, it's going to be optimized and working with our editor.
One thing I'll point out, just because I find this really exciting, is usually you do a tech scout and then you'll go and actually do principal photography. And something that I find really great with Previs is being able to go out, scan a location that you're going to then be working in, be able to compile the assets, then go through Previs and map everything out like literally on the same day, knowing that you're going to be shooting the next day, and be able to physically have a camera and everyone placed and figure out all the markers that you need to ahead of time, so that way on the day you're fully prepared. So like something like this, I think is super cool, being able to have that interactivity, because it also means that not everyone needs to physically be in the same location, which is super cool.
It's super cool, and actually, it's. I remember when I was at Framestore, I worked a lot with the department of Previs, and I think we're already trying to take an interesting angle here, which doesn't exist yet. So we're making Previs more powerful, yet more intuitive. So that's something which is, I think, really unique to what we're doing, but that I can appreciate as a professional.
Do you want to switch to the opening shot camera? You showed it before, and we'll show that, and then we'll move on to setting up the second shot.
Yeah.
I think you want to go into the camera itself, actually. So we want to show, I think it's important to note that you can set up your camera according to the specifications that you care about, right? So on the right-hand side there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can jump directly, if we click on the top, we can jump directly into whatever camera we established. For example, first camera. And we have, the full specs, full industry specs. So lenses, sensor sizes, crop factor. We also have depth of field, which I think is really cool. It helps with giving a bit more of realism and sense of the.
And maybe just one thing to note, that lenses can be specified differently for each of the cameras, so separately, right, that you have in the scene. But of course, sensor size and crop factor, if you make any change to any of the cameras in the scene, that will affect all cameras in the scene. That's sort of actually based on feedback that we've been receiving from our advisors that work directly in Previs.
Exactly.
Right.
And the cool thing is it's super simple to just create a new camera. You just drag and drop one of the ready-made presets. And the cool thing is actually we now have this new feature, which is called the witness cam. It gives you the preview in real time on the top right of the window. So you can already orient it yourself without having to go inside the camera for a first sort of orientation. And then we can start creating some other shot, for example.
Can you
And
play with the depth of field here, like making the truck
Yeah.
blurry?
absolutely, that can happen. And so depth of field is related to distance of the object from the camera, from the lens. So in this case, if enabling depth of field, you just toggle this. And you can play with the focus distance. And so, for example, let's say that I want to focus on the soldier, and I want to slightly blur the truck.
I would say you can only see the legs of the soldier, so just in case people are looking for it right now, it's behind the truck.
Exactly. And so if we want to create something like this, and this is what we can do with the depth of field, Lisa, it's super intuitive.
Yep. Looks great.
And something else we can do, we can quickly keyframe, we can quickly add keyframes and create a little additional shot in here, for example.
You want to pull up the time frame a little bit, just move it up a little bit.
What do you mean?
Oh, just the timeline body. Let's just pull it up a little bit so it becomes a bit more obvious there. Okay, great. And then with the camera selected, then you just hit that one button, the keyframe button.
Exactly.
That creates the first keyframe.
You see it here.
Exactly. And then you just move the playhead down to where you want the end of the shot to be. Let's just say that's a few seconds down. And then you move the camera in place.
Okay,
let's just say that's where you want it to be.
Yeah. There we go.
Right. And then you can actually play that back right away. That's awesome. Great.
Cool.
Do we have time to show VCam now? Is anybody set up to do that? Is that a good moment, Allan or Lisa? Or is that something for later?
Yeah, I think we're going to move on to that now. So Rudy's going to operate VCam and we'll do motion capture.
Great. I want to explain that a little bit, if that's okay, Allan. I'm going to set that up a little bit. This is actually born out of feedback that we received from Allan and quite a few other people who work actively in previs. And this is really important. One of those aha moments when we were building Canvas out, or RADiCAL Canvas that you see here. We essentially were advised by a lot of people who work in live action filmmaking, specifically directors, sort of the lead creatives and cinematographers, that they really don't enjoy working with a 3D camera. And they really enjoy, though, working with a physical object, right, that represents an actual camera in real life. So that's why they asked us to develop VCam. That's what we call it, but I think there are other solutions in Unreal Engine. I think there's something in Blender as well. I'm pretty sure that there are others that have solutions like this. But essentially what it allows you to do is to use your phone or indeed an iPad to essentially use that as your virtual camera. Are we set up to do that right now? Is that okay with you, Rudy? Would you do that?
You want me to use the VCam?
Yeah, if you just switch to the camera that you want to use as a VCam, well, it's not with the track. It will be the camera exactly. That's like that one. Perfect. Great.
Let me just do this.
And then I'll just walk people through it as you get into it. Top right hand side, above the exit button there's a VCam button.
This guy here.
Exactly, right there. So if you're on the same, you should ideally be on the same Wi-Fi as your PC, meaning that your iPhone, or sorry, it doesn't have to be iPhone, it can be Android too. And like in Rudy's case, it is an old Android actually. So you just pull up this QR code.
Yep.
And actually what you do is you open your camera app, and then there you go, and he's in. And now you can essentially walk around the 3D space. He's now in the virtual space and can sort of direct the camera. A few things to keep in mind when you do that is we're just in early development, but in about a week or two, you'll be able to also record with VCam. Today you cannot, but you will be able to do that very soon. There'll also be a stabilizer on it. There'll be a motion scaler, so you can make much greater movements than you are in physical space. And a few other things like that. And this is something we're really excited about. We were told that, live action cinematographers feel strongly about the ability to have a handheld device to direct shots.
I can touch on this just for a second, because I think it's worthwhile mentioning this stuff. Like, first of all, there will be smoothing, so that way you can essentially set it up to kind of act more like a gimbal if you need to smooth out the motion, or you want to go Paul Greengrass, like Born Identity 2, shaky cam, you can do that too. I think this idea, Gavin, was after like too many glasses of wine with you in Santa Monica. It was just like, you know what would be cool? And you're right, like a lot of other packages have, like, there's certain applications that have a feature like this, but nothing has this in a previs environment with motion capture. And the fact that Rudy can be in Italy, you can be in the UK doing motion capture, while also other people are setting things up all worldwide. It completely changes everything. Just because the fact that like you've complete interactivity, you're not bogged down by a keyboard and mouse. You can physically pick up a camera in the sense of your phone and be able to start moving things around intuitively and get the shots that you want.
Let's go all the way now. Okay, so why don't you hit so two things, Rudy. If you can bring my live action motion capture character in.
I need to just quickly drop.
Well, actually, no, I would love for you to stay on VCam if you wouldn't mind, and then also hit the play button on there. Do you mind? I know there's a lot of things you have to do at the same time, but if you can.
The bonus is that I have shaky hands, so it's going to be default shaky cam.
Okay. Well, so by the way, we could easily have done this with more people, but we wanted to sort of just share from one screen. So now we are actually playing back the timeline, and Rudy is working through the scene while it's playing back. And actually, and I'm going to now join this scene while he's filming me with real-time motion capture, and I'll describe to you how I've done that. So, Rudy, are you ready to bring in that character that I'm live mocapping?
Yeah, Alice, can you bring it in? It's or I can do it.
Yes, yes.
I can do it. I can do it with one hand.
I mean, I would love to see you try and do it with one hand. I think I see him.
You get it. It's at
the first time
the
first time I asked Alice how to set up VCam, she said, "You figure it out," and it took me 2 seconds. So it points out how easy it is to jump in.
Okay, so my character, can you bring that closer to the VCam, Alice?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
There you go. That's me. All right. So for those of you who are looking at this right now, I'm in London, and that's me, the guy with the arms out. And if you're looking at my video right now, you should be able to see that I'm carrying out the same actions at the same time. I actually think that the latency that you see there isn't accurate, because this is actually, I think, the screen sharing and Zoom that delays it slightly. So let me just tell you how this works. I have a regular webcam here. There's nothing special about it. This essentially just is for $40-50 from Amazon, this webcam, and it streams video directly into our cloud. That's where our AI is running. And then it distributes it makes the animation data available to any machine in the world that is permissioned to receive that data. So all of you who are currently logged in are permissioned to receive the animation data. I can walk around in full 3D space. There you go. And I can actually do this with about 10 actors at the same time. They could all come in here and animate 10 different characters at the same time. Now, you will see there are some characters behind me that are also animated. That's because I animated them just about an hour before we started the webinar. I recorded a few clips and uploaded them, so video clips, and you can do that too. You don't have to use real time. You can also do it in post-production, essentially just by like uploading videos. So if you want to switch to another camera that shows the characters behind, they're sort of idling and talking to each other. I don't know if you could do that, but that's how this works. I can also record the live motion capture right here in the scene and add it to the timeline for playback. And yeah, we'll leave it here. I think this is probably as much as we could squeeze into this demo, and it's now only 5 minutes to go before we have to sign off.
Yes, so what I'm going to do now, Gavin, is I did just put in the chat for everyone that if you sign up quickly to a free account at radicalmotion.com, whilst I'm asking the team the various questions that have been coming throughout this webinar, you can all jump in and start playing about in the scene, see whether you want to add some assets or cameras or lights. So give me 1 second. And
so I'm sharing the the links. Oh, you've already shared
I've
it.
just done
Right.
it. So
Okay.
if once you've got your RADiCAL account, if you just click on the link that I've put in the chat here, then you'll be able to jump in the scene and experience it for yourself. Because as Gavin
Yeah.
says, by the very nature of screen sharing via Zoom, it obviously doesn't look as good as if you're in the browser itself.
Yeah, and now I can see there are about 8 people who have just joined. For those of you who have just joined, if you look at my screen, I'm just going to share my screen very quickly. The first thing you probably want to do is up here, there's a little viewport button. If you just open that up, you see a frame rate indicator. And what we would always hope is that you have 130, sorry, my apologies, 30 frames per second or more. That's sort of what we would hope that you would have. You can also then disable visual helpers because by now, well, at the moment, they're enabled by default and you turn them off here to essentially enjoy the scene a bit more. Now we have 15 people in here. That is exciting. And down here, you also have a high resolution option for those of you who are on a strong computer and have a screen that can support high res.
And of course, this could be basic, but just control left click to move around and alt or left click to rotate around.
And I would say if you want to have a go at it, on the left-hand side are some assets. Now, I want to say the assets that you currently see are and they are very limited. I promise you this, within the next week or two, there will be thousands of premium assets in there, completely free to use for all of you, right? So you don't have to find them yourself and bring them in. But if you wanted to, you could. There's a great Sketchfab integration as well, where you can just search on, put in keywords for stuff that you're interested in, and then you can bring them in for free. Everything here that you see here is essentially for free. If you want to mess around with it, feel free and drag in some assets and play around with it. In the meantime, Alice, were there questions that...
There were quite a few. I mean, throughout the webinar, there have been 36 answered and some held back. Now, if we don't get round to your question, in the follow-up after this webinar, I will send you all a recording and also answers to questions that we don't get round to. So let's just start off with a few quick ones. We had a question around being curious about the editor's role during the previs stage. Perhaps that's a question for Allan.
I'm going to pass that straight on to Allan and Lisa and maybe Rudy as well, maybe.
Yeah, editor's involved in the sense that as you're doing basic blocking of the sequences, that plays a role in terms of timing and everything else. Editorial is the heart of any film, and so it does play a role. It's less upfront, it's more as everything's getting dropped in. So it really kind of comes down to the relationship with the director and the editor. But at the same time, it's kind of critical just to really lock down the timing, the beats, everything that you're doing. So, usually it might be the director might do it if it's a fast turnaround, but if it's a longer form, bigger project, then the editor plays a big role in that.
Great.
Sorry, I'm loving it because total madness is happening in the scene. Somebody brought in an airplane, and we have.
I was wondering if something like that might happen.
Another question then, again, maybe for Allan, as with previs being part of the pre-production pipeline, are cinematography decisions therefore made earlier, and how does this help with the budgeting of films?
Yeah, well, I'll address the budgeting part first. It definitely helps because less guesswork. You can get to an emergency point where you're spending 20, 30 grand a minute on set, burning people's time on like a massive soundstage. So the more planning that happens up front, the more that everything's concise, everyone knows what they need to do, and there's less chaos, not no chaos. And at the same time, in terms of cinematography, I think the question was, how does that play a role in terms of the back and forth? Cinematographer, like a DP, can have a lot of say and influence on it all. In fact, they can very well be the one using tools like the VCam to actually have a lot more say and be able to do all the blocking themselves. Traditionally, it just kind of comes down to whether, like, how involved they are early on. So it just kind of comes down to the structure of the previs, I guess, but they definitely play a role. And especially now with VCam, like they literally can be the one operating the camera from anywhere.
Awesome. Here's another quick one because I realize that we're at time. It's wild where previs has gone. A storyboard's even going to be around in 5, 10, 15 years' time.
I don't want to hog all the answers, but yes, definitely. I mean, storyboarding and previs, I feel they go hand in hand. It's more an evolution. I feel like, especially traditionally, storyboarding is a more intuitive way to get ideas out. Previs has been a way to kind of really lock it down and communicate to everybody else, as well as for yourself to see the edit. There's a lot of guesswork that comes into storyboarding, in the sense of just how you perceive something versus someone else. So depending on the creatives, like everyone has their own process, but I always see it being around the same way that concept art, whether it is through traditional concept artists or even the director, anyone, it's a way to get ideas out intuitively.
Great. And then I think we have time for a final question. Previs is mostly for nailing down ideas when it comes into the world of filmmaking. AI is often seen very critical because of the training situation with the language models. So people are very sensible when it comes to full AI processes. How is RADiCAL making this invisible work possible so it can be used for an indie or low budget production? I think mostly we have tools at hand that makes even big productions possible for smaller studios. So the question is, how is RADiCAL making this invisible work possible so it can be used for indie or low budget productions? I think that'll be a question for Gavin.
So there's a question, but actually, I think anybody can jump in here. And actually, I love the quote that Rudy wasn't aware. I'm going to ask him to repeat in public. So the first way we make that, we hope that we are directly supporting independent filmmakers, is that the 3D tool set that you see here is designed such that a non-3D user can find it enjoyable and intuitive. That's at least what we try. Sometimes we say that we want any 10-year-old to be able to just say, all right, I know exactly what to do, right? Here's an asset, here's the light, here's here's the HRI map, here's the actor, and I can set up the camera, and it should all feel intuitive. If it doesn't feel quite as intuitive as it needs to be, that means we need to work harder to make that happen. So that's always the first principle. Is it easy? Second, is it collaborative? Right? So we think that none of the traditional 3D tools are sufficiently collaborative. And we think that that's how it works. That's why we sometimes say with Figma for 3D, Figma happens to be a 2D graphics tool, but you can also expand that to Google Docs for 3D, right? Because you can all jump in there and mess around with the scene. It's like, oh, you do the lighting, you do the cameras, and so on and so forth, right? And do this within minutes. Now, Rudy actually said something to me privately. I don't know if he's allowed to repeat this publicly about, let's just say, previs that he has seen at very large institutions and how we can compare to that, even with what we've done today. Rudy, are you at liberty to speak about, maybe without mentioning the institution where you work, but in this particular context?
Well,
but,
this is something I think I can also confirm with Allan, is that at the moment, previs, I've worked at Framestore for a bit more than 4 years, and I worked on a variety of titles for Marvel, Disney, and so on. I was a senior modeler there, but a lot of times I work with previs artists, and at the moment, the previs pipeline, or at least the big production previs pipeline, is still not very defined, in the sense that a lot of times we would have to work with very rough scenes in Maya, simple blockouts, sometimes literally working with cubes, or to just have a layout. Exactly. And so I think that already by thinking about giving a bit of dignity to the previs or the conceptual idea, we're making, a huge statement, because stuff like this, for example, in a big production, I would need to go down go up into another floor and talk to another colleague, share the Maya file, and so on. In this case, what amazes me is that we're right now 16, 20 people in the same scene. Mm-hmm. Somebody brought in an airplane, and we were already spontaneously creating some sort of weird scene, and I think this is the powerful, imagine that we're talking with a visual effects supervisor or director This for me is a really cool and fun breakthrough. So it's not only useful, but it's also
I
entertaining.
hope we were able to answer that question a little bit. Lisa, would you like to add something? I'm not forcing you to. I'm just curious.
No, I'm having a great time watching this plane land, you know, amongst the trucks.
Open to Burbank
in
Airport.
this, yeah. No, I saw a question a minute ago from, I think, Arturo asking if we were sharing this recording, and yeah, but it looks like it was answered, and I
Yeah,
think you already
we
touched
do.
on it.
Alice, is there anything, because now I really am aware that the time is up. We're already 5 minutes over, and we promised, I wanted to promise everyone to keep it to that 1 hour. But if there is there anything pressing you think that came up that you absolutely want to throw us at before we bid farewell?
Oh, no, I think there'll be a couple of questions which I will get you to answer outside of the webinar, which I'll
Okay.
attach to the follow-up email. So if you didn't sign up for this webinar via LinkedIn or via our landing page, then I won't have your email. So if you didn't, if you could just add your email into the Q&A, then I will make sure I add you to the list to send you the recording.
Awesome. Everybody, thank you so much. Lisa, Allan, you've been absolute stars. Rudy, thank you for, being the glue for it all, the creative glue. And then last but absolutely not least, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone who joined us. I wish I could have seen your faces and maybe heard your voices as well. And maybe you'll find another way of doing that next time. This was our first webinar. I'm sure we can do better. Hopefully you'll give us feedback. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a fantastic week.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye,
Cheers.
everybody.